Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today I want to talk about adapting the Cosmere. So I was reading an article that was essentially talking about the fact that the Cosmere could essentially be the fantasy world's MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So the person that wrote this article was kind of speculating about a way that it could be adapted and what things should be focused on and stuff. And I don't really agree with half the things that was said. I'll put a link to it if I can find the article again. But I don't really agree with everything he says. Some of it he contextually misunderstood. I assume he's just like writing about it because he doesn't seem to have read all the books yet. So he doesn't really know where this fits in and how that could do that. So I just kind of wanted to give my thoughts on the best way I think to adapt the Cosmere. Not just Mistborn as I talked about before, but the Cosmere itself. So, as always, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And let's begin. So, the Cosmere. Okay, so far we know that the Cosmere has a few main pillars. Two of those are definitely Mistborn and Stormlight Archive. I believe Elantris will come in there and kind of be like a third one a little bit. But for me, the third one, at least in terms of adapting it to a cinematic situation, would definitely be the World Hoppers. Because we would need to focus on the plots of Stormlight and focus on the plots of Mistborn, but between those, we need to establish the nature of the connections. And I would hate for the idea of this crossover character or something in Mistborn or whatever taking up more time than the main characters of that story. So that's why I kind of think the third pillar, the third main pillar should be the idea of the World Hoppers. So let's talk about Mistborn a little bit. I already have a video talking about how I think it should be adapted. I think it should be a movie trilogy, and I think it works really well as that. At least the first three. The rest of it, like Era 2, could probably be transitioned to a TV series or something. Especially with the way it gets towards the end, it will probably connect with more stuff, and I think it will work a little better as a TV series. So I think Mistborn will be great to start off with because it is very digestible. It's already complete. We know where the story is going. We know how it starts, so we know exactly the type of tone that it should be taken when adapted. There's multiple connection pieces and crossover points that can be emphasized in order to make sure that they're recognized later. Things like Hoid or things like various materials like aluminum and stuff like that. All in the idea of cognitive shadows, just that entire concept. A lot of these concepts can be like very much emphasized in the Mistborn movie series and kind of left little hints and stuff like that. And I personally would probably do something like add a little bit future references. That'll be later crossover things. Like full spoilers for everything in this for Cosmere, of course. So I would essentially like hint at future reveals. I would like have a few characters refer to Kelsier as Thetacar or something like that. I would have them like making references that'll like trigger your ear when you hear them later in a different series or something like that. You know, just to really emphasize these connections and crossovers, even to the point of changing some of the way the original story went. Like how I mentioned Thetacar, like that wasn't, put out in there. Like we could do little add-ins, little additions to make the crossovers a little more clear, a little more explicit and stuff while not being overpowering. I would really, really enjoy that idea. So I really would love them to also adapt Secret History, but I don't really know the best way for that to fit because it runs concurrently with the last two books of Era 1. So if it was like a TV show or whatever, then that would be weirdly separate. So I think maybe the best way to do it would be to interweave that story in with the other two, even though those last two books are so much of a single event, so much of a single, to me, a lot of the last two books of Era 1 feels like a contained Sanderlanche in and of itself. So to be honest, those two almost could be merged together. At least some parts of them could. Some parts could be omitted, something like that. Like when Vin is, kind of like in the third book, when Vin is captured, we can be doing all the stuff with Spook. Like that could be pulled up a little quicker and can happen a little quicker. And then either all the Vin stuff could happen later, and then we cut between Spook and Cognitive Shadow Kelsier so that we know that the one that's talking to Spook is not Kelsier, and like you could kind of interweave and adapt it. It would take some good writing and some massaging of the events and a lot of open-mindedness from the fandom to not lose their minds at the changes. But I think it could totally be done. It could be done in such a way that would emphasize these connections and these crossovers and the connected nature of the Cosmere. And I think it could do it brilliantly. At least I'm confident enough in my own theoretical writing for scripts that I think I can do it. I don't know. Who knows? So next up, let's talk about the Stormlight Archive. I think the Stormlight Archive, assuming the first 5 and the back 5 are different enough in time that you can consider the first 5 like Era 1 of Mistborn, and we can say that that is a complete story. Because by the time any of these adaptations are happening, Brandon will probably be on his break between book 5 and 6. And I'm terrified of anybody adapting anything of a book series that's not complete. Because Game of Thrones PTSD, even though I dug it and having, like, yeah, all those issues. I kind of dug Game of Thrones, but I do understand that without the actual source material, they really fell off. They really dropped the ball. And I really wouldn't want that to happen. Especially since Stormlight probably won't be done until I'm in my 60s. Which is depressing if I think about it too long. But I think it, at least the first 5 books could be adapted very well as a TV show. As a huge budget, kind of Game of Thrones level show. Or, I mean, in order to get the popularity I think this needs, it would pretty much have to be live action. Because there's no, I can't think of a single animated series that is like just that as big as I think something like Game of Thrones or like The Witcher or, you know, anything like that has been in recent years that is totally animated. The closest thing is that that companion show, I guess I'll call it a companion piece, the Witcher thing, the Night of the Wolves or something. I can't remember what it's called. But the animated spin-off of the Witcher show, like that's the closest we've gotten, but that didn't do very well. Even The Witcher didn't do very well. So I think just by, you know, obligation of having to go where the money is, the show would need to be live action, which of course gives me fear for the idea of things like just the world, just the look of the world, because oh, how can you make a chasm fiend not look like just CGI monstrosity? Like, but I think it will have to, because we also have so many crossovers there. We have crossovers and interconnection pieces in there, and having a TV show would allow for a lot more expansive way to explain all those connections and things. And we would have characters like Zael and stuff like that, which is why I think right after the Mistborn trilogy movies are done, or even before the movies are done, we could do a Warbreaker movie, because there is significant connections there. We have Vivenna and we have Vasher, huge connection points, and we need to get introduced to Nightblood, because Nightblood is probably going to be important. And as far as I know, with Warbreaker itself, the world of Nalthus will probably become a little bit more important. At least it'll be recognizable Cosmere-wide. I don't know how important, you know, to the core of the Cosmere it'll be, whether or not, you know, Brandon's going to write when Nightblood is going to have, I'm stumbling over my words now. I don't know if Nightblood is going to be just a crossover significant book, or if it's going to become a Cosmere significant book. So it's, you know, too soon to tell as far as that goes. But I really think that kind of adaptation, like a TV show, further emphasizing on these connections and these crossovers, all while still, you know, playing our regular kind of stuff out. And, of course, compressing some of these things and changing some stuff for the medium will make it a lot more digestible for the masses. Oh, and another thing that I want to bring it up, but mostly because I don't want it to happen, but in Mistborn, the Ska, right? So is in Hollywood right now, I feel like the default, the easy low-hanging fruit thing to do would be to make all the Ska black, because slavery and shit. And I really can't stand that, and I really don't want it, which is one of the reasons why it actually took me a minute to get started on Mistborn, because it starts off talking about the sky, and I couldn't deal with it. So if it's like it feels like low-hanging fruit, because if they did that, then theoretically the show would get Twitter points for being diverse or whatever, being progressive. But it also kind of works in the favor of just the story itself to make the distinction between the people more clear, the noble versus the Ska or whatever, unless they're only going to cast short, squat people somehow. And then it would make it will make it easier just visually to tell who's a noble, who's a scholar, or whatever. And I wouldn't like that generally, but a visual shorthand is easy. So instead of just doing the common thing, making them all black people, you could just like theoretically. I mean, that would probably be just as difficult to do. If I don't know, I really hate the necessity of the visual cue thing of it because I hate it because it's basically manufacturing divisions and I can't stand it. But if like I don't know if they could be basically any other ethnicity or something, or because Vin is often described as being very Asian influenced and her look having like epicanthic folds and everything like that, and Kelsier is just kind of, I think his description comes across as just blonde white guy. So I think it would almost be just as easy. I mean, for visual differentiation, have the Ska be people that are all at least of some mild Asian descent, be it Pacific Islander or even a lot of native people have very almond-shaped eyes, almost Asian-ish, not really empathic fellows having, but similar, like something like that to give an easy visual distinction, because it would be awesome to have an actress that is like half Asian at least play Vin so that we could get the same look, because I've really grown attached to the art of Vin. I would really love that. So something like that could be really cool, and at the same time, we could have like almost I guess that's kind of what they did with Shadow and Bone, actually. They made her half Asian to make it like distinct that other country she's from or whatever. But in the same time, if we have people that look specific ways on Scadrial, essentially, we could then cast someone that looks dramatically different than them to be Hoid. And this like can work in two ways. You can either cast someone that is very visually distinct, that we will always recognize that is Hoid in every project they pop up in, right? Or you could take advantage of the fact that he is a master of disguise and almost cast different people each time he shows up. Especially, I think you wouldn't really be able to do that with Stormlight because he's such a prominent character in Stormlight. But you could, like, depending on how deep in his disguise he is, you could kind of just cast someone completely different and give some other kind of way to imply to the audience that this is Hoid. Like on Nalthus, like I don't think I barely recognized it was him at all until he tells that one story to Sereni in the Council of the Gods. I barely recognized he was the person they were talking about until that story. And then he pops up, in multiple stories, but sometimes he's just so subtly in there, you just would never know it's him. So they could either play that up by casting the same person or play up this Master of Disguise angle, plus he's a light weaver. You could kind of play that up by casting totally different people. So there's multiple options there. But that is when I want to talk, that brings me to talk about the idea of this third pillar, the connections and the world hoppers and the world building nature of it, right? So I would definitely do that through Hoid. So Hoid could be the clear character that pops up everywhere else, and also have him talking to some of the people about Silverlight or something like that, like emphasize his issue with Silverlight, bring in Chris or something like that, to the point where we could almost have a complete spinoff of either Dragonsteel, whichever book is Hoid's origin story. We could either have a separate show that is Hoid's origin story, or a separate show that is essentially all the world hoppers. Like, I would love a show that is essentially just called Silverlight, and it is basically Arcanum Unbound, where it's just world hoppers from all the worlds come in. Or we could do like an anthology thing, right? So I would love this idea too. I think this is probably my favorite idea for it. So I would love, love, love a show called just Arcanum or something like that. The title doesn't really matter. But every episode would start with Hoid on a different planet talking to different people and telling a different story. So he could be somewhere on Nalthus, like doing some kind of his smoke stuff or whatever. And it's like, I want to tell you all the story about a world you've never heard of or whatever. And tell the story of Six of the Dusk or, something like that. Like, that would be amazing. Like, every episode will be bookended with Hoid talking to people. So we start off with him talking. He does a little light weaving thing. And then it like pushes into the story and we go off into the story for the whole episode, basically telling one of those short stories, and then we come back and Hoyt is like wrapping up the story or whatever, and then he just kind of leaves, and like we get a hint that he's about to hop off the world or whatever, and then next episode is another short story. So I think that would be a huge pillar for connections and crossovers and just explode the nature of the world building, and would probably get people begging for some of those one-offs to get a full story or at least a full movie, because there could be some expansion of the Cosmere that's like movie only, like TV show only or something like that. How convoluted and complicated / awesome would that be? I'd be totally into it. But the work that would go into watching all of it, holy hera. Yeah. So yeah, that is kind of where my head is right now. These are my main points. I think that a Mistborn TV show, while either a directly after or concurrent Stormlight Archive, first 5 books emphasize, show going at the same time, while teeing up the Silverlight or Arcane or whatever, the Hoyd anthology show. Or the Hoyd anthology show can just happen at the same time. And then, or I guess giving, there's multiple ways it could be done, assuming they wouldn't try to swamp Brandon with like multiple adaptations all at the same time. That probably would be so incredibly stressful. But so if we had a Mistborn movie series, and like that's all we got right now, plus the emphasis and the connections and all that stuff, and then just do the anthology show, that whets everyone's appetites for the connections and crossovers and stuff. And then later on in the show, because Hoyd's around in Mistborn, but he's not huge in it. So like when he shows up in Mistborn, he could be recognized from the anthology show, and that would be really cool. So there's multiple ways that it can be done, which I think would work significantly better than just trying to turn 10 books of an unfinished series into a series of movies or like anything else like that. So I really like this idea. I really do think that those are the 3 pillars that should be focused on: Mistborn, Stormlight, and the crossover nature, the world hoppers and Hoyd storytelling. I think that would like do the best to communicate these stories to the masses, and it would create a great foundation that just can balloon and balloon and balloon. And hopefully it doesn't reach the issue that Marvel is having right now, where they can't make movies that are the same quality as their old movies, because now that's seen as bad quality. So you get stuck in this forever having to increase the awesomeness or whatever, even though Brandon doesn't really seem to have an issue with that. That just kind of seems to be where he is. So yeah. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video because I am, again, rambling. I am just going to ramble, and I could talk about this for who knows how long. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Let me know in the comments down below, how do you think the Cosmere should be adapted? Do you like this idea of focusing on our main 2 pillars plus the main crossover setup? Or do you have a different idea? Are you one of those people that are very much against the live-action Stormlight Archive? Let me know about it in the comments down below. So, as always, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I will talk to you all next time. Peace.